Okay.
Boom, we're on. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Ruth and I'm your student living officer. I'm drawn to, I can't speak, well, let me start that again. Hi everyone, I'm Ruth and I'm your student living officer. I'm joined today by Sorcha from Bristol Drugs Project and Becky Risley from UWE to help answer some of your questions on drugs, including alcohol and harm reduction. Sorry that this isn't a live video, we had some technical problems, but we thought we'd record this anyway so you can all watch it on the SU Facebook page. So Sorcha, would you like to start off and explain a little bit about the work you do?
Yes, so as we said, I'm Sorcha and I'm Festival and Nightclub Harm Reduction Lead at Bristol Drugs Project. In normal times, that would mean going to lots of events and festivals and providing harm reduction advice to people who are attending those things. And at the moment, obviously that's not happening, but we do a lot of work with the universities in Bristol, both UWE and University of Bristol. And at the moment, we're launching a harm reduction service at the University of Bristol where people can come and get a free drug reagent testing kit. Me.
Cool, thank you. And Becky, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Becky Risley. I'm the Senior Drug and Alcohol Practitioner for DHI based at UWE. So I'm able to support UWE students around sort of harm reduction needs or looking to make changes to their substance use, anything sort of drugs including alcohol related.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, so we've been collecting questions from students via Instagram or Facebook and like Google form and stuff. So we're gonna basically run through those now. Obviously, it's a shame that we can't have live questions, but we've got quite a few questions set up. So yeah, and then Sorcha, do you want to chat more about the amazing service we've set up?
Do you want me to do that now or after the questions?
Go for it now and plug it at the end as well. Might do all the plugging.
Yeah. So the service that we've just set up is so people can get harm reduction advice at the university and also get a drug reagent testing kit. So the way that will work is if you want to sign up, either send us an email or give us a call. I'm sure we can post the contact details along with this video. And I'll arrange a time to come and meet with you at the Students' Union. And when you get there, you'll just have to do a little assessment form that just helps us kind of monitor who's coming in through the service. And then based on that, I'll give you some harm reduction advice on whatever drugs you're using, train you how to use the reagent kit safely and just make sure you understand kind of what they can and can't do. And then I'll give you a kit. And as part of that, we're doing a study to evaluate the scheme, just so we can see what the actual impact is on people's drug taking behaviours. So we'll also be asking you to sign up to that, but that is completely voluntary. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. That's basically
nice. Thank you. Right, so we're gonna basically just take all your questions until we run out of questions, and then that'll be the end of the video. So the first question is, what do I do if a friend has a drugs problem? I don't know, Becky, if you want to start.
Sure. So I guess, talking to your friend first would be, the first sort of port of call. What I'd recommend is sort of, explaining, what your concerns are. And, I guess, we always sort of talk about being non-judgmental and compassionate, and that can be really difficult when we, have our own sort of beliefs or sort of thoughts or views. But, approaching it with a sort of understanding that they might be taking sort of drugs problematically for a variety of reasons that you might not be aware of. So I'd encourage people to sort of, think about what it is that they're concerned about and how potentially that makes them feel, and approaching it in that sort of respect. And I guess possibly having some resources or some links or materials sort of go along with that conversation, sort of, potentially, getting in contact with BDP or DHI or the university services, maybe having those leaflets or those contact details available so that if your friend or the person concerned is willing and up for sort of talking to a professional about it, then they know what they can do sort of in that instant. Anything you'd add, Sorcha?
I think that sounds great. And I guess the important thing is that people don't make these changes unless that's what they want to do, and to kind of be prepared for the fact that it might not be the time for them to go and get support. And if it's not, just be ready to be helpful when they want help. You can't fix people. And yeah, it's kind of down to them to want that support.
Cool, thank you. So how do you know what you buy? How do you know if what you buy is safe? Is a question from a student. I don't know who wants to start.
So the first thing to say is that the safest way to use drugs is to not use them at all, always. And it's very much down to how you use drugs, if you're thinking about whether it's going to be safe or not safe. Obviously, testing your drugs is an indicator of what the effects and risks are likely to be of a particular substance or a particular batch. But it's also really important just to follow harm reduction advice every single time you use drugs. So making sure that you're taking sensible doses, you're not combining particular drugs that are quite dangerous to use at the same time, all those kinds of things. And if you want that kind of information, there's loads of really good resources online. You can follow The Drop on Instagram or Spaced DHI on Instagram. And there's all sorts of tips and tricks on there to try and reduce the potential harms of any drugs that you're taking. I don't know if Becky has anything else she wants to say.
I guess the only sort of thing that comes to mind is, if you haven't got access to a sort of reagent test kit or sort of a means to be able to know exactly what it is you're taking, I guess the safest way to do it is kind of testing the gas before putting your foot down. So if you're unsure of something, then taking a really small amount and seeing how you react, and leaving a long enough time before sort of increasing that dose.
Cool. Right, I guess leading on from that a bit is, where can I find information on keeping safe?
There's absolutely loads of information online. You obviously have to be a little bit wary because some sources are more trustworthy than others. But yeah, as I said before, following Spaced on Instagram, that's Becky's services Instagram, or The Drop on Instagram, which is my services Instagram, is a really good place to start. On BDP's website, we have a section for The Drop where we're quite regularly posting blogs on different sort of harm reduction topics. So there's been ones on sort of like partying safe during COVID and things like that. And I'm trying to think of other really good resources. It's good to sort of get clued in on the legal stuff as well. So Release is a really good website to kind of learn about your rights as someone who's using drugs and is obviously potentially going to be carrying drugs, which is illegal. And there's other things like the drugs meter is a really good tool to kind of compare your use with other people's. So you can kind of get a bit of an idea of, actually, I'm using this drug far more than everyone else. Perhaps that means I need to kind of have a little look at like if that's a healthy pattern of use, or if there are some changes that need to be made.
So I'd just like to add that the drug combination chart from TripSit is a really brilliant resource. So you can sort of see what happens if you take MDMA with cocaine and how sort of risky that would be for you, or various other substances. But also the Drugs and Me website enables you to be able to click on what happens if I take ketamine and alcohol together, or ketamine and MDMA, and can just give you that sort of helpful polydrug use information.
Cool, thank you. Right, we've got two questions on like specific drugs now. So how much MD is too much MD? I don't know, Sorcha, do you want to go for it first?
Yeah, I'll go for it. So it's a really good question, and the answer isn't going to be a specific number. It's down to so many different factors, such as your tolerance, your weight, how many times you've used it before, your gender is a really important one. Girls seem to be much more susceptible to MDMA overdose. They think it's something to do with water retention, but they're not 100% sure. So girls tend to need a lower dose, and that's not just because they're generally smaller in size, although your body weight is something that will play a part. So there's a couple of different sort of recommended ways of knowing your the right dose for you. One is 50 milligrams plus your body weight in kilos. So if you weigh 70 kilos, it's 120 milligrams. But generally is a figure between 80 to 120 would be what most harm reduction advice would advise. But just on the topic of MDMA, one of the most important things to think about is hydration. Drinking not enough water is bad for you, and drinking too much water is also really bad for you. So if you're in like a hot, sweaty environment and you're having a dance, we recommend that you're kind of sipping a pint of water an hour. That's not necking a pint of water on the hour. It's drinking it slowly throughout, otherwise you're at risk of sort of overhydrating yourself. And also just things like making sure that you go, and if you are in those like hot environments, going outside to have a little cool down if it feels like it's getting too much. If you're feeling kind of overstimulated or anxious or anything, just going somewhere that's is a bit more quiet, a bit more calm, a bit less loud, a bit less busy, just so you can sort of ground yourself and get back to kind of a good headspace. There's no point kind of staying in an environment that's making you not feel particularly pleasant.
Cool. Becky, do you have anything to add?
It's not really around that question, but I guess while we're on the topic of MDMA, it feels like there's a bit of a gap in people's knowledge around sort of their interaction with SSRIs. So quite often, sort of anecdotally, people sort of report using MDMA when on SSRIs, which are sort of antidepressants, a really common antidepressant, and not having a similar experience to their peers. So not experiencing the euphoria that you might expect, which can then lead to increasing the dose and sort of chasing that high that other people are having. And you know, I'm not a neuropharmacologist, but my understanding around it is that the SSRIs inhibit the MDMA sort of effect. So you'll have the stimulating properties without that euphoric feeling, but that can also really increase that risk of serotonin syndrome as well. So, you know, something to be really cautious around if you are taking SSRIs and thinking about MDMA use. So I'd definitely speak to sort of your local harm reduction advisor.
Cool. And yeah, the next question is, what's the balloon gas? So now, Becky, do you want to go? You're smiling a lot.
So yeah, no, I guess it's a really good question. You know, I'm sure anybody who lives in Bristol has seen sort of these canisters all over the floor. So yeah, actually understanding what it is. So it's a product called nitrous oxide. And it's commonly used in sort of dentistry and sort of hospitals. It's like a short-term painkiller, anaesthetic, and it's also used for cooking, so to make sort of whipped cream as well. But you know, it's sort of classed as a dissociative. So it sort of just disconnects the sort of messages from the brain to the body temporarily and can leave people feeling quite sort of floaty and giggly, but it's a very short-term effect. So, you know, the biggest risks around it is generally sort of people damaging themselves whilst using it, so like potentially falling off of sort of where they were sat or stumbling over. But yeah, so generally, yeah, it's put into a balloon to reduce the risk to sort of freezing the sort of windpipe and the chest, and it's just a sort of safer way to do it is putting it in a balloon.
Cool. Anything to add, Sorcha?
I think that was really good.
Nice. Right, we're now going to move on to universities and harm reduction and drugs, including alcohol. So I guess the first question is, what is a harm reduction approach to drugs, including alcohol? Who wants to start?
I'll happily go for it, I suppose. So traditionally, universities have had a zero tolerance approach to drugs on campus. So that generally means that if you're caught in possession of drugs or dealing drugs, you will immediately be put through sort of disciplinary procedures. And in a lot of cases, universities will put you through disciplinary procedures even if you have used drugs, which under the Misuse of Drugs Act is not actually illegal. You cannot be criminalised under UK law for using drugs. It's possession that's the offence. So that's kind of one of the issues, is it's kind of going beyond what is required of the law, and is also potentially having quite devastating effects on people's futures and prospects. And like when it's in halls of residence, for instance, people were losing their accommodation because they like smoked a spliff in their room or something like that, which just seems like quite a disproportionate and unhelpful way of approaching the issue. So both universities in Bristol, UWE and University of Bristol, have adopted a harm reduction approach instead, which basically is just a much more pragmatic approach to drug use on campus that understands that disciplining people not in proportion to the actual sort of harm of what they're doing isn't helpful to anyone. So it includes things like educating people on the risks of using drugs. And if people are caught in possession or things like that, they'll be referred to support services, places where they can sort of change their behaviours rather than just getting punished in the first instance. I don't know if Becky has anything to add.
Yeah, so I guess just sort of talking about harm reduction more broadly, it's you know, the understanding is that it's, you know, these practices, there's lots of practices that, you know, people partake in that have risks, such as driving. So we have seatbelts, or sex, so we have condoms, and you know, there's lots of harm reduction sort of stuff that is available with other sort of dangerous practices. So it's kind of recognizing that, you know, people have a choice and people can choose to use drugs. And that doesn't necessarily mean we should ignore the risks and just let people carry on. There is things that we can put in place to reduce the harms and to make those practices a little bit safer.
Oh, thank you. Right, this is more about focusing on the drop-in, so probably Sorcha, you'd want to take these. But it's firstly, will the uni be told if I access the drop-in, and could I get in legal trouble if I access the service?
The uni will not be told if you access the drop-in, and no, you won't get in legal trouble either. So the way that we're managing people that come into the drop-in is exactly the same as we would any other person that comes and accesses our service. So we have a confidentiality agreement that says all the information that we gather is going to stay within our secure system. The only time that would be broken is if we consider there to be a severe and immediate risk of harm to yourself or someone else. And in that instance, we would tell the person, we're going to have to break confidentiality because we're worried that you're going to die in the next half a day, which I think is a totally appropriate time to kind of get mental health services or whoever needs to be involved to kind of make sure that that person is safe. We're not going to be telling the university really anything at all, apart from things like numbers of people coming through the door. It's not going to be names, it's not going to be which halls of residence, it's not going to be which areas out in the community or anything like that. It's just sort of metadata, so we understand if we're reaching people and that kind of thing. So no, there's not really a risk of any sort of legal harm. But one thing to add is we're not doing drugs testing at the drop-in. Please don't bring any drugs onto campus, because that would be a silly thing to do. And then you would be putting yourself at risk, not because you're coming to the drop-in, but just because you're carrying drugs around in a city centre, which obviously does carry risk. So yeah, please don't bring your drugs with you.
Cool, thank you. This is just a wider one, I guess, about the testing kit. So which drugs will the reagent testing kits work on?
So you can use reagent testing kits on pretty much any drug. There are some, they are a bit tricky sometimes if the drugs that you're testing are a mixture of different substances. The reaction from one substance can kind of mask the reaction of another. So they're not like 100% accurate tests, and we're not pretending that they are. And that's why we're sort of offering training alongside giving out the kits, just so we make sure that people understand that that is the case. And I'm sure there was a second part to the question, but I've forgotten it.
I'm muted. It was literally just what drugs do the kits work on?
I did have a second point though. My second point was that there's some drugs that are so chemically similar that the tests aren't able to tell the difference between them. So for instance, they can test if a benzodiazepine is present, but they can't test whether it's Valium or whether it's Xanax. And it's the same thing with the 2C series of drugs. So things like 2CB, 2CI, 2CE, they'll be able to tell you it's a 2C, but they won't be able to tell you exactly which of those. If you want a more detailed analysis of your drugs that would be able to distinguish between those drugs, you can send off a sample to Wedinos, which is a postal drug testing service. It just takes a week or two to get your results, so you have to be a little bit organized if you want to use that.
Cool, thank you. Right, this is the last question, and it's a big one. Why do we criminalize recreational drug use? I don't know, Becky, if you want to start with that.
Thanks, Ruth. Well, I guess, ultimately, under the sort of Misuse of Drugs Act and the Novel Psychoactive Substance Bill, these recreational substances are illegal to be, being in possession of and giving to friends and sort of all of those sort of practices. But, I think it is starting to get more recognised that, people using in a recreational way where sort of harm to society, families and themselves is minimised through sort of safer practices, that, this level of criminalisation can be really detrimental. So I know that in Bristol, if you are caught with a sort of personal amount of recreational substances, then, you won't necessarily get a criminal record and it won't necessarily go down that route. And they've got the DEP program, which is the drug education program. So, and that's all about sort of educating people and sort of that harm reduction interventions and giving people that opportunity to sort of learn a bit more about the substances that they're using and doesn't ultimately result in potentially sort of life-changing consequences for them. So, I think there is starting to become a little bit of a shift in sort of how society is managing recreational drug users, and it does feel like it's sort of moving for the better, in the better direction. Sorcha, anything else to add on that?
No, I think that was brilliant, and I know that Bristol Uni has their own sort of drug education program that they're running at the moment, which is also called All About Drugs, and I'm sure we can also post a link for that when we put up the video, and that's a kind of similar program to the Bristol City Council, Bristol Police drug education program, but it's just been adapted for students. So if anyone does want to learn a bit more about drugs and harm reduction, then just sign up to that. And I believe UWE does a similar or the same course.
Yes, we do. We do a similar course, yeah.
Nice, thank you. Right, we've run out of questions. Thanks so much, both of you, for answering the questions. Would you like to just say a closing statement? I don't know, Becky, if you want to start.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, if you're tuning in and you're interested in sort of harm reduction around your, recreational or even problematic drug use, I'd say, just trying to educate yourself the best you can, reaching out to organisations like Spaced at UWE or BDP at UOB, and just educating yourself best you can, really, and sharing those messages that you do learn with your peers, because I think harm reduction is definitely best spread through sort of word of mouth and peer-to-peer, opposed from sort of organisations. So yeah, great.
Cool. And I guess I think pretty much exactly the same as what Becky just said. Like, we're happy to speak to anyone at any stage of their sort of drug taking career, is what we call them. Don't know why. So if you're sort of new to drugs and you just want to learn a little bit about effects and risks and just tips on how to stay safe, like just telling your friends what you've taken and how much water is too much water, those kinds of things, we're happy to speak to you. If you're at the other end where you think you've picked up an addiction to Xanax or anything like that, we're also there to help, and everything in between those two places. We're not an addiction service, we're not just a harm reduction service, we can do kind of everything. So yeah, get in touch. You can find all of our information on our website, which is just bdp.org, I believe.
Amazing, thank you. And yeah, thank you to everyone who watched this video. Sorry about the Facebook Live not exactly working, but we still got your questions answered. And yeah, feel free to get in contact with me if you want to link up on like harm reduction stuff. My email is ruth.day@bristol.ac.uk. Thanks everyone.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.
Everyone. Bye.